Last week, there was a statement published online that really took internet and the world by storm. Can anyone guess where this statement came from? The statement was the following. By the end of next year, we will have AI that is more intelligent than any one human being. Who said this last week? Elon Musk, yes. Good guess, a correct guess. And thinking about AI, because AI is not just a buzzword, it's really revolutionizing our lives, businesses, and society at large, with challenges and opportunities. But thinking about AI, it's inevitably so that we need to think hard about data. Because AI is really, especially generative AI, right, lives off of data. And that is why we are focusing on data for this year's Stockholm Sustainability Summit. Data is all around us, especially in the city as well. I mean, looking out on our beautiful city, you can ignore the renovation work going on, but that is a piece of beauty as well, because it stands for development, right? And renaissance in the city. But data is all around us, especially in the city. But the question is then, are we doing enough of it? And are we doing enough with it? How can we make sense of the mass amounts of data that we gather just from our daily operations? How can we convert this information into real actionable ways going forward, especially when it comes to meeting our sustainability goals? These are some of the questions that we hope to answer today as we welcome both those leading data strategies and strategists in companies and the business community and society when we convene here for the Stockholm Sustainability Summit. My name is Andreas Hatzigiorgio. I'm the CEO of the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce. And we are pleased to welcome you all today to our yearly flagship event, our sustainability event. In our third year hosting this summit, as with every year, we frame the content and discussions of the day around a central theme. In recent years, our world has experienced a dramatic shift towards an increasingly digitalized way of life. And the list can really go on. I just mentioned AI today. And raise your hand if you dare to share with us if you use any AI tool or instrument on a daily basis. Raise your hand. Yeah, I would estimate this to a 42.5% share in this audience that use AI on a daily basis. I think this is an underestimation because I would dare to say, I believe, that some of you that didn't raise your hand actually do use and utilize AI tools, even though you don't know it. I mean, how many of you use, this is an iPhone, how many of you use Siri, for instance? Raise your hand. Or a similar tool. Yeah. So I think that adds a few percentage points to the people in this room, you guys, who say that you use AI tools, because Siri is really an AI tool, right? So the next frontier is a digital one, and we need to be ready for it. Technology can be a force for driving sustainable change in cities, but we must also be able to both understand it and share it. So that is why, again, my friends, city lovers, sustainability collaborators, that I'm glad and proud to welcome you all today to the Stockholm Sustainability Summit 2024. With further ado, I would like to invite up our Deputy CEO and moderator for this event, Daniela Wallfogel. A warm round of applause.
Thank you, Andreas, and a warm welcome from me as well. And I'm so happy to see so many of you who are passionate about sustainability and about our data-driven future in cities. As Andreas mentioned, we have a wide area of speakers today. Which means that we will be dividing our summit into 2 different sessions. First of all, we will start off with a keynote from Paul Wilson, who is coming to us from Connected Places Catapult in London, and I will soon give him a more proper introduction. And then we will have a panel discussion on leadership in data-driven cities, together with an eminent panel. Then we'll have a short break, a short coffee break, and we will reconvene after that for session 2, where we will discuss with 3 companies that have taken this into their own hands. And they will describe how they have developed products and services that, with a data-driven way, make our cities a lot smarter and a lot more sustainable. And we will also end that session with a panel discussion. And after that, we of course want you to stay here, because we are going to host a after work together with London and partners here. So please stay for drinks, and please stay to listen to some of the tech companies that are here to visit Stockholm from London. And with that, with no further ado, I would like to invite our keynote speaker up on stage today, Paul Wilson, who is joining us from Connected Places Catapult, which is a UK leading innovator accelerator for cities, transport, and place leadership. A warm welcome to you and a warm round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Daniela. Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you very much for having me. It's terrific to be here. It's my 7th time in Stockholm. I love Stockholm. So when I was asked by Emily and others, could I come, I was very excited to come. And I'm going to be talking to you about why would we use data and decision making in cities and climate, and then some of the topics of how can we do that. So that's my exam question. This is the one slide I'm going to use to talk about where I come from, the organisation I work with, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. So I work for the UK's Innovation Agency for Cities, Transport and Place Leadership. We work with transport bodies, city leaders all over the country and all around the world. And it's our job to bring people, places and businesses together to create a future of sustainable growth and prosperity. I like that bottom phrase, but I also like thinking about regenerative growth, because quite a few people in economics would say what we're doing to the planet has got to such a state that we don't just need to think about sustainability, we need to think about regenerative growth, growth that actually takes carbon out of the atmosphere and restores some of the natural processes that we are successfully destroying at a very fast pace. I'm going to first talk about why is this such an important topic. And I'm going to talk about cities in a global context. I'm going to give you very rapidly examples from 6 different initiatives that I've been involved with over the last decade. I'll do that quickly. And then I'm going to talk through more slowly one example of how we're using data to help both cities and utility companies, particularly water companies, electricity companies, and power companies, to manage when there's an unprecedented climate moment. There's a big flood, a big storm, or fire. And I'm going to talk you through that a bit more slowly. And then look at what's working in this space and what's not working. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start by quoting some data from the World Resources Foundation. This is a body that most of the governments of the world fund. It's a kind of authoritative body about what is creating greenhouse gases. I'm believing that most of us think and understand that one of the most present dangers we all face is a change to climate that could spiral out of all control. If you look at this data, it gives you lots of detail on where is all of this coming from. It shows you that buildings and transport systems, particularly in cities, account for about 1/3 of all greenhouse gases. But that actually understates the fact by quite some way. If you think about who it is who's consuming food and how food is produced, or you think about all the factors that go into a city, the figure is much more like 80%. I'll do this very quickly. About 71% of the world is covered in water. That's the sea and the oceans. Only about 3% of the surface of the earth is covered by cities. But cities consume about 75% of the world's energy. They produce about 80% of the world's greenhouse gases. And of course, as we full well know, cities are the epicenter of the economy. It's often said cities are humanity's greatest invention. It's an often quoted statement. They're also potentially humanity's greatest crime scene if we don't get to grips with what we're doing. When I was born at about the beginning of this chart. I'm not going to tell you exactly because I'll let you guess. But it was about the start that you see there when there were about 3.7 billion people on the planet. In my lifetime, the number of people on the planet has doubled. That's a lot, isn't it? I feel that. I can tell it's getting more busy. It's getting more crowded. Where I live, I just think, gosh, there's a lot of people about. And I also, where I live, I see people from all over the world just as I walk out to my local shops. I like that, but it's also different from how it was when I was, 10, 20 years old. So the world is coming together. It's doubled in size. The astonishing thing is, in our lifetimes, by 2050, it will go up again by about 20 to 30%, or a third. There's a lot more people coming. Most of the people who know about this subject then think it will decline. And already you see some countries with declining populations. There's a belief that less people will have children because they're worried about what's going on. So probably the epicenter of growth could be around the middle of this century. So that's going to be in the region of 10 billion people. These people are going to live in cities. Every week, 1 million more people live in a city than they did the week before. Every week, 1 million more people live in a city than they did the week before. Cities are growing all over the planet. If you look at the volume of materials used to manage this, at the moment it's about 40 billion tons of building materials used a year to make cities. We're talking about concrete and steel and glass and all that kind of good stuff. So by about 2050, it'll be twice the amount of materials that we're using to manage this growth. An area the size of Australia will be covered by cities. I like that graphic. It just brings it home, doesn't it, to what we're talking about. About 1.5% of the Earth is covered by Australia. So that's the issue that we face. And then we come to the original question of the day. Why use data in decision-making to accelerate climate action in cities? I almost want to respond back as probably I hope you're feeling, geez, we better use data to manage this process. It's quite an enormous challenge. When you think of climate change, I think the flip side of the coin on climate change is how do we manage rapid urbanization? This is actually the epicenter of what is needed in tackling the climate crisis. So, why would we use data? In Tokyo, 38 million people call Tokyo their home. We call it the biggest city in the world today. About 35 cities in the world are more than 10 million people. That's growing to about 40 or so by the end of this decade. But I'd like to suggest this is actually the biggest city in the world. It's the Pearl River Delta from Foshan down to Hong Kong. And whatever the motives to try and create this as one region, you can now get from one side of this city region to the other in under an hour on public transport. That's astonishing. When I went to Hong Kong in 1990, it was a 4-hour journey to get from Hong Kong to Guangzhou. Today, that's less than an hour to do that. They have done something amazing, the longest bridge between Hong Kong and Macau in the world. This is the biggest city region in the world. 86 million people living in this city region. About about a half of the world's population lives within a 5-hour flight of the Pearl River Delta. That lets us Europeans think we're probably not really the main centre game players in this story. This is actually probably a story about what's happening in Southeast Asia, China, and Africa, in fact. Those are really where the biggest changes are. And I know from talking to some folks last night that there are people in the room who work on those cities in the room with us. It's great to be talking with you. Wherever this happens, the problems are comparable. Here we are in India. Here we are in London. And here we are in Stockholm. Congestion and urbanization is a real issue. In Sweden, you have one city about 500,000, as you know. You have another city of about 1 million. We're in it now. And worldwide, there are 500 cities of about 1 million people. But by 2080, that will be something like 1,500 or more. It means the role of what it is to be a place leader or a city leader is becoming one of the most important jobs for all of our futures. And I want to just say a little bit of respect to those brave souls who put themselves at the front line of managing cities. It's a demanding job, and often you've got everybody attacking you from every direction. It's pretty tricky. So let's move into the topic of data. I'm going to talk you through my own little personal journey on thinking about this. I had these thoughts. I put these thoughts together in my own mind a decade ago. And I'd been working in fintech for 15 years. And I didn't want to keep working in fintech. I wanted to find meaning and purpose in my own life. So I thought, right, I've seen how much tech is used in capital markets. I've seen the vast amounts of money spent on tech to trade equities or manage derivatives. And I'm more interested to use the latter years of my career to think about using data in cities. So I made a sort of career change a decade ago and have been working on the topic of cities and data really since then. So I'm going to tell you just rapidly a few stories of what happened. The first thing that happened is I got involved in open data. Lots of governments around the world put their data online. And you can see here's the Stockholm Open Data Tool. Put your hand up if you've used an open data source, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, good. More than half the people in the room, that's quite impressive, are using these kind of historic data tools. And this has added a lot of value to the management of cities today. We heard from Dago last night about the city as a system of systems. It's a lot like being a surgeon or a doctor, where I've got to think about using data to pull all the systems together to analyze what's going on. And these kind of open data tools have helped our cities to do that today, and it sounds like many of you are involved in that. The next thing I did was to set up a city-scale digital infrastructure in Bristol. It was a project called Bristol is Open. We put fibre in the streets. We put 5G antennas on the lampposts. We used Internet of Things when it was trendy to say Internet of Things. We all thought we were very cool for saying stuff like that. And what we found was that the telecoms network doesn't do what we need it to do. And later on, we'll hear from Christopher from Telia, and he will talk about how Telia are addressing this issue and doing some really important things in that space. What we found was that telecoms networks have made a decision in the sort of 70s, 80s, that they would be hardware-oriented because reliability was what they needed most. So they stuck hardware all over the place. The problem of going down that path was that the hardware is fixed. It's reliable. It does what it does really well. But when you want it to do something different, you got to take it out and stick something else in. At the same time, those crazy internet kids, they started using software to do everything. And they set off on a different path, which was less reliable. It was flaky. Stuff didn't work as reliably. But in the course of 20, 40 years, what you see is those trendy internet kids who relied on software, they now are ruling the roost. They cloudified everything, they virtualized everything, and in truth, the telecoms industry has suffered as a whole worldwide. It's stuck in a hardware-devoted infrastructure, and it needs to transform its infrastructure into a virtualized, digitized, cloud-based infrastructure, a software-defined network. And that creates the fluidity to enable whatever it is at the end of the network, be it a driverless car or a smart building or a forest that needs some kind of connectivity, to draw down the connectivity on demand. And that on-demand capability is what telecoms companies worldwide are trying to get towards. It's a big ask because they spend billions on their infrastructure. So it's not just simple to turn from very reliable hardware into virtualized stuff. But we set this up as a Bristol at a city scale. We plugged in the university supercomputer. We plugged in the planetarium for visualization with 7.1 billion pixels per second visualized in a glorious, beautiful projection environment with city data coming off lampposts all over the city. We plugged in housing in the poorest part of the city where landlords didn't care about the state of the housing, and we helped the residents monitor the damp in their houses so that they could write a letter saying, I'm tracking you, landlord. This is the state of the damp in my house and the mold in my house. I've got this set of data now on you. And did it work? It worked a treat. The landlords were freaked out because suddenly they've got like people they didn't know who they were taking money off, writing to them saying, I'm tracking you and the damp in my house using these IoT sensors. This was all very trendy back in the day. We also hacked into the city's lampposts. We created performance space where when you walked in front of the lamppost, you could dance around and it would show your shadow coming back to you, and it would created what we called a playable city. We were using data and digital to make cities more livable. We weren't very impressed with the idea that this smart city movement would be all about fear and security and crime. We were very aware there were lots of companies who wanted to play on fear and sell their software on the back of, we'll help you with crime, it's really bad. We were there to say, let's enjoy culture, let's use data and digital to build relationships in city centres. And I think that is the future of a lot of our high streets, where we see high streets having difficult times as shopping goes online, that we will create cultural experiences with data in our cities that build us together, we enjoy and interact on. Anyway, that was Bristol's Open. I then found myself very fortunate to be asked how to spend £230 million. This was quite a lot. I'd never had the opportunity to do anything like that before, and got to shape something called the 5G Testbeds and Trials Programme for the UK. And in that programme, we tried out 5G across all sorts of things. We did cultural engagement at the Bath, the Roman Baths in Bath. We did manufacturing in Birmingham. We did race cars on a racetrack, racing around at high speeds, driverless cars. We did salmon fishing in Scotland. We tried all sorts of different applications of using data. It was good. What we didn't do is work on interoperability enough. I'll come back to that in a second. Then I worked with a worldwide group called TM Forum on setting smart city standards around the planet. The biggest issue we tackled there was the public-private relationships. This is, how do you build trust between private companies who have to report their earnings on a quarterly basis so that they're pleasing shareholders, they clearly have to be driven by profit, and government bodies who are allegedly responsible for public good and citizen welfare, until it comes to election time, when they also have to do all sorts of strange things to convince the electorate that they should be elected again. How do you put these two things together in partnership? It's pretty tricky, actually, and it is, however, I see, you can't really expect a government to be running a telecom network. There are cities around the world that have now tried to run their own networks. I don't really think that's clever, because it's something that will require a lot of capital investment over time. So this public-private relationship is quite important. We got more than, well, it's about 300 different big organizations to collaborate on 10 principles that would make working together work. And we did some really interesting things between big players like IBM, Cisco, Siemens, and big cities, Los Angeles, even Moscow, Bristol. We did more with NEC, Nokia. So there's quite good thinking there. I got very involved in a body which Stockholm is involved with still, called Open Agile Smart Cities. Many European cities are in this body. This is now working with the International Telecoms Union to create standards that are called minimal interoperability mechanisms. These are practical tools that allow a city to work with private sector and create data standards. So everybody isn't inventing the wheel from the start every time. And these will be endorsed at global scale this summer, 9 minimal interoperability mechanisms. So there's progress at a global scale on these kind of standards. And today I run something that's called the Digital Twin Hub. This is about 5,000 people from 85 countries who are working on what we call digital twin. But these are place-based digital twins. Well, one thing I learned along the way was you need an owner who has a real business reason to want to do this, not just a research project. When there's a business purpose to having a digital twin, because it creates more efficiency, it allows me to hit and know my net zero goals, it allows me to offer a better customer service, I'm prepared to put money into this and keep funding it, especially when I can do what-if scenario planning, and I can actually use this as a core part of my business. So what we see is a lot of big infrastructure owners building digital twins. I'm talking about airports, I'm talking about large shopping malls, talking about railway stations, university campuses, large housing areas, using digital twins for different reasons to manage and optimize their process. If you think about that and then you start to build it back together, you get back to the exciting smart city idea that some of us had a while back. I'm going to show you a short film. You've heard enough of me for a minute. This is about 3 minutes long, 3.5. And it talks about what I'm going to go into a little bit of detail next. One project about how to use data for climate management. Here we go.
Extreme weather events caused by climate change are on the rise. When we're not prepared for these events, the consequences are more serious. Failures occur across interconnected infrastructure networks, meaning power cuts, loss of communication services, and running water. This can severely impact people's everyday lives. And this is only going to become more of a problem in the future as these events become more common and more extreme. Ensuring that infrastructure is resilient to these events is critical.
The climate change resilience of infrastructure networks is a challenge that is not yet well understood and is one we need to address urgently. Asset owners really need to know who are they dependent on. It's really crucial both for the integrity of the assets but also for the service you provide your customers. For example, a range of infrastructure providers. If one of them is affected, let's say, by flooding, and that maybe affects an electricity substation, and then that problem cascades to perhaps the water company that's using that electricity to run its plant and pump water, or perhaps the communications infrastructure that needs that electricity to run the communications network. Understanding these risks in advance and how we can mitigate them is key.
Credo is really useful for angling water to increase our understanding of infrastructure, interdependencies, and the future climatic impacts on our infrastructure. If you think about what's at the core of Credo, and that's data. In reality, it's how we are sharing and using data with BT and UK power networks, and then actually integrating future climatic models and scenarios. So once you've got that data in a connected digital twin that Credo provides, it means that then we can start to visualize this data and use asset failure models to look at how assets become impacted and how quickly and over what sort of time period. This is really about planning for the future. So if we can really understand how our infrastructure is going to be impacted in 10, 20, 30 years' time, that means that the investments that we make and our partners make are in the right areas to protect our assets and ensure that we continue to provide that service to our customers.
This will allow asset owners to use Credo to see the effect of extreme weather events on the combined infrastructure network. And crucially, this will inform what interventions they can make to increase the system resilience.
Credo allows BT to share information with other critical national infrastructure providers in a safe and secure way. It's a distributed architecture where we retain control over our data assets, but allow us to share those data aspects which enable others to better understand dependencies between different infrastructure.
Credo has been designed so that it can be extensible to other asset owners, new sectors, wider geographical regions, and a range of extreme weather events. The wider benefits are actually, it improves overall resilience. The more participants there are, the more holistic the solution that we see, and a better understanding of that interaction between those wider network groups, increasing the benefits from using Credo.
Collaboration through connected digital twins is key to tackling climate change. Can you work with us to expand our network? To get involved, visit the Digital Twin Hub, Credo, Taking Action page.
What we just heard, these are three very big companies. British Telecom, big telco in Britain, as you know. UK Power Networks, one of the biggest electricity companies in Britain. Anglian Water provides water. There are only 7 or 8 of those companies in Britain. A lot of water. What they worked out was they don't know anything about what each other's doing. So when there is a storm and it takes out the power network, all they know is they don't have any power. They can phone up and say, your power doesn't work anymore. It's completely ruined my water pumping station. When are you going to sort it out? It all feels a little bit amateurish, especially when we increasingly have proper weather events hitting us on an increasing basis every year, and increasingly more and more than that. So what we've done there is we've looked at how to create a secure, and I'll touch on secure a bit more, look at the dependency of all these different assets from each other. Now, they do know what is going on in their own fold, but I can tell you their lawyers are extremely keen to make sure that nobody finds out what's going on, especially when it's going wrong, which is the very time when we need to know what's going on. So what we've done, and I'll explain this with this diagram and a couple of diagrams. We started out by working with their experts who know which of their assets are the most flaky. They know which are the oldest power station, the oldest substation they've got. They know where it's going to go wrong. They just don't want anyone else to know. So they know that. They all know that of themselves. But what we enabled to do, and it took 9 months of discussion with everybody's lawyers to be able to do, was to share that information with other utility companies at the point of a climate event. And what the lawyers who are trained to stop this from happening, that's their bread and butter to make sure this doesn't happen. What they agreed to do was to not share that information into a central repository, which could then be taken by the others, and who know what they do with it. They send it to the media. What they can do, though, is they'll share it in a way that can be seen but can't be downloaded. So then we had to create a visualization that made sense of that so that it's useful, but you can't take the data away as a different company. So that created all sorts of technical challenges for us. At first, we put it all in a lump in the middle, but that wasn't going to scale. So then we developed a distributed architecture, which allowed each company to upload its data in its own format, and then we had to normalize the formats, which again was pretty tricksy, and only to allow this to happen once it was agreed there was a weather or a storm or a fire about to happen. So then the government got very involved, got very worried. This is terrible. The Russians will steal it. The Chinese will steal it. You can't do this. This creates a national cybersecurity risk. So then we had to secure this data in a highly secure, publicly owned, very secure data center. We could have done it on Amazon. It'd have cost us maybe, I don't know, a couple of grand, but we ended up having to pay more than 10 times that to be able to do it in a highly secure way. So there's a lot of security elements thought through in that. We then used different types of modeling to model what would happen. And here is the workflow of what went on. You can see a little bit of the visualization. You saw it also in the video. So as we've been doing this, it got more and more interesting. And now in the UK, the regulator, Ofwat, Ofgem, have said, right, we love it. The Cabinet Office have said, yep, go for it. And now we've got cities all over Britain saying, mayors saying, we think we need to see this kind of stuff too, because it's our citizens who are impacted when things stop working. So we find ourselves now all sorts of complicated dialogues going on around using that kind of data in a federated way. It's a challenge, but I just wanted to show you because of the progress. Lots of people involved. My last slide is just to touch on what's working and what's not. My experience of this has been that technology obviously is not the problem, that the technology is typically 10 years ahead of the ability to get to grips with it. And the problem of that is that the pace of change in technology is accelerating and will only continue to accelerate as AI creates more of that technology. So if we're taking about 10 years to get to grips, but we see the exponential change going like that, I don't really have a clever answer to that, apart from society and tech are going to get further and further apart. One thing that is happening that I think will be good is a lot of this work gets funded through research funding, like Horizon Europe or in Britain, Innovate UK. But in Britain and in Europe, there is a move to put what's called innovative procurement in place, so that when procurement happens, instead of procuring the tried and tested stuff that we know works, we can actually buy more innovative things from our mainstream budgets. So in Britain, something like 10 billion is spent on innovation, but 300 billion is spent on procurement of third-party services annually. What if we turned that 300 billion into an innovation stimulus by allowing procurement officers to buy more creatively? So that's an exciting thing that's happening, where we get away from just piloting and trialing into mainstreaming. I think that's good. But cities everywhere are bust, particularly in Europe. And so we need to find solutions to things that are consuming all our budgets. That might be assisted living centres for elders. It could be about thinking about damp houses, air quality. It could be thinking about flooding. It could be thinking about all these day-to-day issues rather than just philosophical big issues. And as I said at the beginning, the more we spend this on regenerative growth that is taking carbon out of the atmosphere as we do what we do, and as we build, then we can actually begin to restore the world that we're living in. Thank you very much.
Stay for just a few questions. When you work with cities and you travel the world, would you say that cities are actually becoming a lot smarter and smarter, or are cities on average still quite stupid?
I love that, stupid cities, because I haven't written a book, and I wanted to write a book, and I'd call it Stupid Cities, because cities are difficult places, aren't they? I think what I actually think is happening really is in China, where the ethical constraints around the role of the government are different than they are in a democratic world. We see a lot more use of technology to manage Chinese society. And I have a funny feeling that, I don't know how this really happens, but at some point in the future, we will look to China to say, how did you do that and did it work and what was good? Mm-hmm. Because they are able to use technology in ways that we would not be comfortable using. Like, I got on a bus in China, it already saw my face and took money off my wallet. Mm-hmm. whoa, that would alarm us all. But I think a lot of the innovation is happening there, to be quite honest with you.
So there are some things that we should steal with pride.
We should steal with pride, did you say? From China? I don't know. That's an interesting statement, isn't it?
Another question then. Based on your experience, who is responsible for taking the lead on creating like a data-driven culture in a city? Is it the political leadership or the business community?
I tell you that the core to this working, you call it triple helix or even quadruple helix. So it's when civic leaders are prepared to work with academia, the business community, and then civic society. This is the point where it works, because everybody has a role to play. And it's only then when trust between people begins to happen. And so I've seen projects where it was tech-led. It makes the techies happy for a while, but it usually fizzles out. I've seen community-led, but without any money, fizzles out. So it's when all those sectors come together collaboratively with purpose that it works.
Okay, but do you have any like best practices or anything that you recommend for city leaders or public sectors officials to ensure effective execution? Because the projects that you describe are very complex.
There are real good practices and standards out there, and it's quite common for people to reinvent the wheel because they think they're really clever. And don't worry, I'm really clever. I'll sort it my way, ignore all of them. I think there's enough people who've been doing this for, best part of a decade or more now, that there are good practices that people can learn from, and it's wise to build on the shoulders of the failures that went before.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's clear that data will have a central role in shaping our city's future. But what do you hope to see in the next, say, 5 or 10 years? And are you more worried or more hopeful?
I think, what am I hoping to see? I actually think this topic is the topic of the day. And I mean that very profoundly. I do believe that it's how we manage our cities that is the answer to the climate crisis. There's a phrase that lots of people use, which is nations pledge, cities deliver. And it's the role of central government to go to COP and make statements. It's the cities that will do the work. When we got to that stats at the top of my presentation saying that it's in cities where we are really impacting the climate. It's these buildings, it's those cars, it's the energy system, it's the food system where we all live. That's the epicenter of the climate crisis. So how we manage our cities is the flip side to the question of the climate crisis, including the role of nature in our cities. So what do I want to see? I think it's, without a doubt, you've got to use more and more data. Otherwise, we're lost in ideology and theories, and that's how many cities have been run. Ideologically, what we need is good data to run cities, and it's coming.
Thank you very much, and a big round of applause for you. And now we will move on with our program, and I would like to invite up my first panel up on stage. Please welcome Annika Jakobsson, Special Coordinator for Climate Action, City of Stockholm, Prue Ashby, Head of Sustainability at London and Partners, and Anna König-Järnröd, former Mayor of Stockholm and CEO of Arvidssonstiftelsen. Please give them a warm round of applause. Welcome. Okay, so we all see your titles and your organizations here, but could I please ask you, first of all, to start off with a round of presentations so that the audience can get a better understanding of the competence and the experience that we have on stage. Prue, our guests from abroad can start, please.
Hello, everybody. My first visit to Stockholm. It's great to be here. I'm Head of Sustainability at London and Partners. London and Partners is the business growth and destination agency for London, so we promote London around the world. We've brought 14 amazing high-growth scale-ups. They're all in the audience who are exploring this Swedish market. We also attract businesses from places like Sweden into London. We work with corporates on their innovation strategies, and we also promote London as a great place to be entertained. And one of our big success stories was ABBA Voyage that came from here, and we brought that to London, and it's been very successful. So our mission is to create economic growth that is resilient, sustainable and inclusive, and I think that lives and breathes everything that we do, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Welcome to our fantastic city. Anna.
Yes, so today I'm the CEO of a foundation that works with quality of life in the built environment. But I used to be the mayor, and I had also a lot of international engagement when it comes to sustainability. And exactly what's been mentioned by Paul is the cities that deliver. So we were C40, the world's biggest network among cities, that also delivers on the climate agreement and the Paris Agreement, and not the nation states are delivering on that. But of course also World Economic Forum will look at a systematic approach when it comes to energy solutions in cities. I was the president of Eurocities, Europe's largest network among cities, where we pushed the Commission for even higher ambitions when it comes to climate goals. So I will stop there, but it's, yeah, I think we have a lot of good examples internationally when it comes to data collection and sustainability.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a little while. Annika, please.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm Annika Jakobsson. I'm Special Coordinator for Climate Action in the city of Stockholm. I've had this role for about a year. Before that, I've been working in the government offices. I was State Secretary for the Ministry of Environment. I've also been working at the Foreign Ministry, and I've done some years in the civil society as country director for Greenpeace in Sweden, and also Secretary General for Action Aid in Sweden. And I worked as a consultant in the business sector on environmental issues. So, yeah.
So as you can see, we have a lot of pooled experience here up on stage, and you've all worked in a leading position in cities, or you work in leading position in cities. So if we start by like zooming out the perspective, what do you think are the most important and the most challenging sustainability issues cities have to solve today?
I'll start. Three things, I think, mainly for, well, particularly London, and I'm sure some other cities. Firstly, air quality. Just over 10 years ago, a 9-year-old girl died in London, and on her death certificate, it was the first time in the UK that it was attributed to air pollution as to why she died. So since then, there's been a lot of a drive in London about how to solve the challenges around and the causes of air pollution. The second area is infrastructure. And what I mean by that is the challenges around electric vehicle charging, but also ensuring we have the energy infrastructure and the energy supply. We have the infrastructure in terms of cycle infrastructure. We're doing a lot better in London now, and we have an exploding cargo bike industry for that last mile delivery. So that's all really exciting. And then the third area I think that's a challenge is the built environment. We have a lot of what we call heritage stock or old buildings, and I think you do here as well. And it's about actually improving that to be sustainable, meeting net zero goals, and ensuring that the buildings that we live and work in are suitable for a long-term future.
Mm. Anna, please.
I totally agree, but not to repeat. So I would say to transform the cities from consumers, as we heard, a lot of the people lives in cities and consume energy and other things. So transforming the citizens and cities from consumers to producers with a regenerative system. It could be food systems, urban food, but it could also be to recycle and reuse and utilize waste. Only 8.6% of all the waste in the world of the material are being circular. So I think we can do a lot with procurements in cities to reuse building material, construction material, but also other things, and also to access the extra waste of heat and water that we today see is inefficient system where it's leakages, and we can reuse that kind of waste in energy and water as well.
Annika, what do you see from your perspective?
Well, I agree very much with what Prue and Anna has already said, but I would like to refer what Paul mentioned. I think it's the biggest challenges are time and money. I mean, if you look at cities worldwide, and especially European cities, I think we are facing these similar challenges, and we have more or less the same emissions, the same emission sectors, and we know pretty much what to do to reduce the emissions, but we have to do it in such a short period of time. For Stockholm, as an example, we have a target of becoming a climate positive city to 2030. It's less than 6 years to 2030. It's very complex decisions that we need to be able to manage, and it puts very high demands on the city organization's ability to collaborate with, I mean, both internally, but also with external stakeholders. So I would say that, and also that this transition comes with big investments. And even though these investments are often profitable in the long run, and in almost all cases, the cost of inaction is higher, it's still investments that needs to be made here and now, and we don't have all the models to do the risk sharing that we need to do. I mean, no city can do these investments alone or in silos. So I would say time and money.
A follow-up question on that. In Stockholm's strive towards becoming a climate positive city, how do you use data?
Well, all the decisions and the climate actions that we take in the city is, of course, based on data and on solid facts. But there is definitely a potential to use real-time data, and I would say that potential is different depending on the operational level. So if you control the heat in a property, as an example, you can use real-time data to control the heat room by room or hour by hour. But on a decision-making level, it's more a matter of, you know, how much energy saving can we actually make, and then real-time data is perhaps not necessary. It's more compilation of data over time. However, if we can collect basic data in real time, then it perhaps becomes easier to quicker compile comprehensive summaries that can improve decision makings on management level. So I would say it differs depending on operational level, but I definitely see a potential for better control of systems and to follow up on effects of actions. And of course also to use AI control and analysis to improve the quality of actions, but also to establish a common understanding of the problem or the challenges that we are facing and a common language on how to address them.
Prue, over to you. London is definitely a leading city when it comes to data. You have one of the best open data platforms, and there is like constant innovation happening, and we are of course all jealous of London. But how would you say that this is reflected in London's sustainability goals from your perspective?
Yeah, so London has sort of three sort of areas that we've focused on in terms of why we're seen as a smart city and using data effectively. One is digital and data leadership. So we have a chief digital officer whose role is to ensure that we open up the data and it's efficient and effective and also available to improve public services. The second area is the strength of the tech and innovation ecosystem. As I said, we've got 14 amazing scale-ups here today, and we always want to be attracting the best innovations from around the world to build that. And the third one is about the infrastructure, the 5G towers, and the technical infrastructure, but also the green spaces as well that come around that. Now, our London data store, which I think is what you're referencing, has about 1,000 data sets. Which can help people understand the city, and they can also see what the challenges are that they can potentially solve for the city. And there's areas like environment and economy and transport and things like that, but also you can delve into them and see trends in data over time. For example, CO2 emissions, nitrogen dioxide, reservoir levels, so on. So I think by being able to open up the data, being able to get innovation access to that and solve these problems, and then get it out to a consumer base that is like Swedish consumers, I think it was touched on earlier, early adopters of new technology. And then just a final point, I think regulation is driving the corporate end, so the big business end, many factors, not just regulation, but also recruitment and keep retaining talent. And so this is sort of driving innovation behavior change from a corporate level, which is also wanting to get this innovation to improve their services as well. So it's all coming together.
Anna, from your perspective, I know that you have long been a very enthusiastic champion of smart and sustainable city solutions. Could you give us a few examples of how data is being used in Stockholm and how we get to become a more sustainable city using data?
Yeah, one thing is to work with reality data and with feedback loops to see if the reforms is giving results, of course. But I think more and more cities can use data to actually predict how to use the digital twins and to use the data to monitor and to have a model about how will people behave, or how will this also have impact if we're going to do A, B, and C, and then we can also be more proactive in our decisions. Or how should we also handle upcoming heat waves in the built environment? And there, for example, so we work together with MIT and KTH, and the chamber is very active as well, and the city of Stockholm, to work with to monitor the city with sensors to see also where in the city will there be the highest risk in the built environment for upcoming heat waves, so we can also prioritize. Because if you have a limited budget, you need prioritization, and that's why also data could help you to be more efficient, to actually do investments where it's needed. But another great example is also to get support for your reforms. And I think one of my favorite examples is actually from London, because so many cities now have emission zones. We have it in Stockholm as well, and it's very debated, like when should you introduce that? But in London, they had sensors in the children backpacks, so the children and the parents could actually see how bad the air quality was. So instead of pushing the reforms from the politicians, so the people are very upset, like they just want to mess with our lives and with our cars, actually the parents were super angry and upset because they saw the air quality and wanted to do, like, we need reforms for the air quality because our children is getting hurt. So that's another example how you can work with transparent data, actually to see, just present how it is. And then I'm sure that the citizens also want to demand for reforms.
But looking back at your years in the city, would you say that data is being used enough in the decision-making processes?
No, we're not there yet. And I think that I had the opportunity to go through Bloomberg, the City of New York's program, and he always asks for data. And so I came back and started to ask for data, and some of the data are 2 years old, and some of the data are not. It's difficult because it's not clear in every department who's in charge of the data, who's in charge of updating the data, and also it's not the same kind of data in the different administrations. So that's one challenge, but at least we build a culture where you ask for the data and also use the data, because if the data isn't collected, isn't used, that's not going to also be valued in your organization.
Annika, what do you say? Should data be used more frequently?
Yes, definitely, and I absolutely agree what Anna said. That it takes time to change working methods and ways of thinking in such a big organization that the City of Stockholm is, but we have definitely a lot of the basics in place, like the safety policies, the guidelines, the support to administrations who are considering using more data-driven solutions. IoT platforms and competence on how to analyze data and so on. But it takes time, and I think it takes time just to implement a climate perspective in the broad sort of variety of operations that we have in the city. So, and at some administrations we have come very far in the traffic office, obviously. But if you look at the education administration, you have to go from looking at the food that we serve in school and instead ask what educational programs do we offer and how do we match them with the future needs in a green labor market? How do we attract young people to these programs and so on? So I think it takes time, and it can, of course, you can be frustrated about that, but we are not a business. It is a politically governed organization, and democracy also takes time. So it's quite natural.
But who should then take the lead? And is it important that city leaders, maybe politicians or companies for that matter, actively embrace like data-driven solutions than trying to set a data-driven culture?
Sorry, say that again.
Is it important that politicians or the business community actively try to set a data-driven culture? And do you see that a lot when you look at the companies that you promote?
Yeah, so I think unless you have the data, you don't have the evidence, and then you can't improve on what you're doing and then basically showcase and improve and so on. So it's kind of an iterative process. I do think it's very important to engage communities and bring them along. And I think that is a big area that leaders need to think about and potentially do better, is how to actually, and one of the companies we've got in the room actually does, from London, actually does that, where they're about bringing the community along, getting their comments, feedback, so that they can be engaged effectively, come along on the journey.
Mm-hmm. Anna, when you met your mayor colleagues in Europe and in the world, did you meet people that had a digital-oriented leadership or not?
Yes, more and more. I think you can't be successful in the future if you don't use data, if you don't ask for data, if you don't prove that you're also delivering in results. And so many nation states, I'm quite tired when it comes to sustainability. They have all these goals, 2050, 2045, but I mean, they're not actually improving when it comes to data on a yearly basis. And in C40, if you didn't deliver, you were out. And I like that kind of perspective. You can have ambitious long-term goals, but you have to deliver in short term as well. And then you need the data and ask for the data. And also, what are we doing today? What kind of decision? And how will this affect our city, our country in the next coming 10 years, perhaps? Then you can have data on that too. But you can't manage the things you can't measure. That's why we need different kind of data.
Okay, so then looking ahead, what do you hope to see in the, say, next 5 or 10 years when it comes to promoting and supporting smart solutions and sustainability in cities? How will data shape the future of our cities? What do you say, Annika?
Well, I think personally, I'm most excited about the social innovations that the development in technology can actually provide. I mean, I would not say no to reduced working hours, as an example, if that could be a result from, you know, smarter cities and smarter ways of doing things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a connection in health and sustainability. I mean, people who cycle to the job have 45% less chance to get cancer and so on. So it's a real related, I mean, it's what's good for planet is good for people. But I hope that in the coming years we can use also quantum data to solve problems before they even evolve. And to see that, okay, the system with sensors and so on also are giving alarms, and then we can proactively solve them even in a more efficient way.
Prue, what do you say? Anything that especially excites you for the future?
Yes, so I think that a city will be totally smart when it's totally circular. So everything we use is reused, refurbished, and a purely circular system. Secondly, that a city is adaptable, and I know from being only in Stockholm for a few hours, you're the kind of city that adapts and responds to challenges. And I think we don't know what's going to hit us in the future, so we need to be able to adapt. And then I think the third thing is we all need to take responsibility ourselves and take action ourselves. London and Partners, we're on our own road to net zero as an organisation. We are a data-driven organisation as well ourselves, and we deliver on targets that are set for us, one of which is around sustainability, innovation and supporting those companies. So I think if all of us in the room can do our bit in our fields of influence, then I think that's the best we can do, and that's a positive future for our cities.
Okay, one last question for you then before we end. Is there anything that worries you when it comes to using more data, trying out new ways in cities in the years to come?
Well, I think the big challenge with the use of more data is the use of excessive energy. And so it's almost like, how can we get the best out of the data and all the processing that it does, but without using even more energy and then having to cope with that problem further down. So I think that's a big challenge.
Anna?
Now, of course, it's one issue is always integrity and GDPR, but I think that when you look at smart systems today in Spain with autonomous vehicles and trams with the cameras and so on, they also solved it. So they work together with it due to the legislation. So I think I'm very optimistic actually when it comes to technology. The only challenge is that the data that we put into the AI from the city's perspective is not updated. So we really need to do our homework in the cities and work with the researchers to have shared data. That's also between companies and in business, that we share data together to find out the best innovative solutions. So we can do the innovation procurement that was mentioned before.
Annika?
No, yeah, I would agree with Prue that a lot of the effectiveness and the more effective way of using resources we have a constantly increasing demand for resources, and as long as we have that, and that sort of takes away the effect of increased effectiveness of using resources, then it's sort of, we don't close the loop. So I think that is, and that is not an issue that we can solve here, but I think there is something on the demand side as well that we have to look at.
Can I just make one final
point?
Please. I think one final point, and why we're all here together today, is about collaboration between cities.
Yeah.
And if we're going to make a difference, and really for our children, our grandchildren and so on, we need to be working together on solving these climate issues. So really pleased to be here where we can interact and hopefully work together in the future.
And we're really happy to have you as well. Thank you for your insights and perspectives, and a big round of applause for this panel. Now we will take a short 10-minute break, and then we will reconvene for our second session. So, please, we will be getting started with session 2 in just a few seconds, so please take your seats. Thank you. Okay, please take your seats and we will be getting started with our second session of our Sustainability Summit. Okay, welcome back to this second session of our Stockholm Sustainability Summit. Please take a seat. We just had a session, our first session, where we learned that leadership plays a crucial role in both driving forward sustainability initiatives and making the transition to more insight-driven governance. Likewise, many companies are now taking data-driven sustainability into their own hands and making leaps that only the fast-moving private sector can do. Therefore, today, we've brought together 3 companies who have all created various services and products that aim to provide sustainable solution for our urban challenges using data. I would like to invite up our first speaker, Christopher Ågren, on the stage. Christopher is Head of Product and Data Insight and IoT at Telia and will be telling us more about their successful crowd insight. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here and really great to listen to the first part here. A lot of insights given. As mentioned, I head up a part of Telia called Product within Telia Division X. We do IoT and AI products for our customers. And I think, well, some of you know at least, native Swedes, that Telia is the largest telecom operator in the Nordics. But what you might not know is that we actually have one of the largest continuous data sources on how people move in society. And if you do, you might not know how location insights about this mobility can actually be used to create more sustainable cities. So I'm here to tell you all about it. And just to set the stage, location intelligence is a certain type of data. It is the discipline of turning location data into outcomes by using data enrichment, visualization, iterative analysis, just to name a few. And there's actually a lot more data that has a location element to it than you might think. Actually, around 80% of all data generated actually has some sort of location connected to it. Could be a latitude and longitude, or it could be, the name of a city, for example. And it remains largely underused, actually. So 80% of all data has a location element to it, and 10% is used to power important decisions. And think of it as in a city, of course, a lot of it has to do with location. What does this have to do with Telia? Well, it turns out that operating a mobile network, we've heard already talk about 5G towers, for example, it means that we actually generate lots of location data. We do so anonymously. So we've created a product called Telia Crowd Insights, and it's about how people move in society. So we create statistics based on anonymized and aggregated data from Telia's network. Almost 20 million subscribers across the Nordics are behind this data. We turn it into actionable insights. And this is, of course, very useful insights if you want to know something about how people use our cities and how we respond to what happens in the city. And the way that it works is that when your mobile phone is on and it moves, it connects to different antennas, or we call them base stations in our network. This generates a network event, so then we know that, well, there's roughly 100 mobile phones connected to this antenna. We don't know exactly where there are, so it's not about tracking, but it is counting essentially how many are in certain areas, and then follow these patterns as mobile phones connect to different antennas throughout the network. And this is actually a pretty huge data set. So every day we analyze 3 billion events per day. That's a lot of data. So this is what we do every day. We clean the data, apply AI, quality assure it, and then we transform these very deep telco-specific insights into something that can inform decisions on based on people mobility. So the over 3 billion signaling events, that represents around 4 billion trips per year in Sweden. So this leaves us with actually the largest continuous data set of mobility in Sweden at the moment. There's no one else that has anything that comes close to this. And our data is produced, it's always on, it's 24/7, 365. And just to put that into perspective, the classic way of getting insights how people move when you, for example, plan public transportation is to do travel surveys. Resvaneundersökningar in Swedish. Perhaps one of you have answered them. They go out roughly around every 5 years. So for example, a large region in Sweden typically sends this out every 5 years to 100,000 or so respondents through web and email asking you how you traveled during 2 weeks of that year. And then around a quarter of that respond to those surveys, and that number is actually declining. People are less likely to respond to surveys. Compare that to continuous, always-on data, and this is an example of the difference between classic and a modern data source. So the insights we derive, these signaling events, they typically end up in statistics in these 4 areas. So either it's about understanding how many people are in a particular area, or how many are visiting a particular area. Could be a visitor from another part of the city or another part of the country. We also generate statistics on trips. So how many people travel from A to B? Not where they took the bus, but actually where they went from A to B. And that could have included bus, train, walk, car, whatever. So this is the true travel demand. And then we also do routed data. So we can say that, well, from A to B, this many people went by rail, and this many people made the trip through other means. So what can you do with this? Well, I want to start in Finland, and I want to start with this scary picture. Perhaps it doesn't feel so scary, but it was scary to the Helsinki Regional Transport Authority, because they had invested 1.2 billion euros to extend the Helsinki Underground to expanding suburb of Espoo. That is, a lot of people live in Espoo that work in Helsinki city. And they felt this is something that they were scared of. It's their expensive subway, but there's no people. So what they needed to do was they needed to make sure that people could get to the station by bus, which meant rearranging the existing bus network. But that's not really easy to do if you don't know where people actually want to travel. Where do they start their day and where do they need to go? And how do you find that out? Well, classically, you put these on the road. You probably ran over these, dunk. That gives you some insights. It doesn't really tell you where you're coming from or where you're going. To do that, then you send out these travel surveys that less and less actually answer. So this was a few years ago, and this was actually one of our first initiatives back when Crowd Insights was just an innovation project. Now it's a thriving product area. Well, but this is what happened in December 2017 when they opened the subway. And you see the subway line here in orange, and then there's a bridge here under the red circle. And the darker the color you see, the more people started their travel that day and took the subway. So as you can see, it's mainly people living quite close to the subway that actually took that subway. And that was not really what they wanted. Remember, it was about getting Espo to travel on the subway. This is Espo. So there's a lot of white on that map. This picture, on the other hand, shows what it looked like when changes were made to the bus network. And they started enabling feeder lines to then get people to more easily get to the subway. So now, using this crowd data, the Helsinki Regional Transport Authority can much more quickly and easily then see the actual impact, much better equipped to plan, because what happened if it had still looked that way? Well, you send out travel surveys, you count cars on the road with pneumatic tubes. It would take a long time before you have the data to be able to take action to then maybe change a few bus lines and improve even further. But also they could use this data that we provided on the actual travel demand to calculate the reduction in emissions. So this particular picture, the delta here, is actually 14 tons less carbon emissions per day. And they can do this almost in real time. So those of you who are familiar with software development knows that you use something called A/B testing. So you try something, you evaluate, and then you can improve after that. So they're able to do this in the real world. So let me give you another example. I assume some of you recognize this guy. This is Anders Tegnell, Sweden's chief epidemiologist during the COVID pandemic. In the Public Health Agency of Sweden. So they needed reliable data on people movements because the urgent need of quantifying whether people adhered to the recommendations and whether they needed to loosen them up or make them more strict. And since we had this historic data, we've been collecting it since 2019 in Sweden, we could start straight away to look at the difference in the movement compared to before the recommendations and after the recommendations. So we saw a lot of big decreases in people movements in Sweden. And this was actually a response from Anders Tegnell when I think a journalist were talking about that they had seen a lot of people sitting at a restaurant. That's not the kind of thing you want to make a decision on. You want to actually use real objective data. And this was actually, I think, was pretty interesting during the pandemic, which very much came to Sweden around early March 2020. And here you see our data, Crowd Insights, showing the difference between Monday, March the 2nd, and Monday, March the 16th. You had a nationwide reduction in number of trips in 22%, and Stockholm, Uppsala dipping a whopping 50%. Normally, if we saw something like this, there would be something wrong with the system. We have a bug in the system. But this was actually what happened. And then this put an enormous strain on society, of course, and having this data alleviated and I think we were able to make better decisions based on it. This actually draw a enormous interest from media as well in actually all the Nordic countries, so it wasn't just Sweden. So we delivered the data to media, we delivered data to national health agencies, and we did so not because really they paid for it, but we did so because we wanted to really help drive a data-driven public discussion. We didn't like the sort of things you saw on the first page where someone had seen that people were moving too much or sitting in a restaurant. That's no way to make a decision. We also got lots of questions around the data, like, is this Telia tracking us? Is this used to surveil us? Is it GDPR compliant? These are really important questions to ask of any data source. So we thought it was also a great opportunity to actually talk and educate about this, that this is in fact GDPR compliant, and we are proud that our insights are always created with privacy in mind. And that goes for a lot of data that's actually created in the city. You usually have some sort of connection to the citizens. So actually securing this is very important. Well, having data is not always a great thing. So what is worse than no data? Well, it's actually bad data that you think you can rely on. So what is really important for us is that we are very transparent and we talk about how we create our data. And it's in three different sort of lenses that we describe it. So we want it to be accountable, transparent, and explainable. So our data is created with privacy by design in mind, and making sure that it is all, of course, legally okay to use the data. But we also need to be transparent how the data is created. How is this representative of everybody living in the Nordics? Unfortunately, not everybody has Telia as their operator. So then we need to statistically adjust this data to be representative for the full population. And also the fact that the data needs to be explainable. It needs to work all the time. You need to be able to compare yesterday's data to the same 3 years ago. And during that time, a lot of things have happened. We've invested in our mobile network, people density has changed, and so on. So here we've worked with Statistics Sweden, SCB, to actually develop these extrapolation methods to make sure that our data is always explainable and it's something that you can use for real decisions. And that's a big difference, because when you go and find data, you download it somewhere. Do you have all of this covered? How do you know you can trust the data? And there's many ways you can then use this type of data. Obviously, in city planning, urban development, traffic planning, and so on. Normally, you use this data to optimize something, to make it better for the inhabitants, and that often means that you also then reduce emissions, because some things become more efficient in how people use public transportation, for example, or where you want to build something. And this is just an example of what it could look when you visualize it. You can imagine 3 billion data points. You can visualize it in a lot of different ways depending on the use case, but this is just an example. I also want to share another example. Perhaps some of you have seen this report. It's from the Swedish consultancy Tyrens that was published the other week. They had some really interesting takeaways. They used this. They used our data to among others, to develop these insights, and they concluded that around 57% of all trips are shorter than 4 kilometers. It could easily be made by foot or bike. That's a huge saving in emissions. But then, as a region or a city, how do you know where to start? Well. We have a product that we've developed together with the Swedish company Zero, founded by the founded through research in the Royal Institute of Technology here in Stockholm, where our data is combined with Zero data. We apply AI, and we're able to actually then analyze where should you start out of these 57% of all the short trips. Where do you get the most bang for the buck, if you will? And it's called Travel Emission Insights. And it allows you to measure your carbon emissions, benchmark them, compare with historical data, and then prioritize actions, because you can't do everything at once. And then you want to make sure that you do the things that have the biggest impact. And this is a screenshot from the tool, actually. And this is how one of our customers, Botkyrka municipality, is using this. So here I've used a filter in this tool to show short trips that have the most CO2 emissions in the municipality. And I've selected this, which is like the worst offender. And you see below, it's a bit small text here, but there's almost 6,000 trips per month on this route, and 41% use their car for it. Why is that? Well, it's not strange when you look at the numbers below, because it says that taking public transportation is 4 times slower than car. It takes 4 times longer time to go with public transportation. Why is it like this? Well, someone who knows Botkyrka better than me perhaps can elaborate on this, but this is what the data tells you. And I hope you get the point, and I think this is an example of how a municipality can start to both understand, measure, but also take meaningful action, and take the right action, the one that actually gets you to the value quickest. Thank you.
Coming up, all our speakers on stage in just a little while. Now over to our next presenter, Anna Kerr, who is Regional Director for Sweco, that will be sharing a project on how they are working with sustainability through design. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. Great, really nice to be here at the Chambers. And really interesting conversations so far, so I hope I can carry on that track. And I must say I also had a really interesting morning meeting up with London partners and scale-ups from London. We had some very interesting discussions there as well that I hope that we can take further. My name is Anna Kerr, and I'm from Sweco, from the architectural division of Sweco. And I'm going to talk about how we, as a company in the construction industry and consultants, can work with data and AI to optimize sustainability in buildings and in the construction industry, and in the bigger picture also in cities. And I think that a lot of us and Paul already this morning talked about the numbers of cities and how cities are the biggest problems of carbon emissions today. I think he said actually 80%, so I'm a little bit below that. But I think they also hold the key to the solution, our cities. And they have a big impact when it comes to reducing carbon in the future. So cities are really important, and we've also heard that from all of our speakers already. But the built environment that we represent, of course, is the biggest problem. And it represents more than 40% of the global CO2. And with urbanization, we know that we are becoming more and more urbanized. We have to deal with cities. And we have to collectively solve some of these problems at all scales, from building and materials to cities at scale. So Sweco, we have a big responsibility to find solution together and co-create solutions. We're 22,000 consultants, architects, planners, engineers, and we do more than 150,000 projects a year. This means, of course, also that we have a lot of data about our projects. And when we can combine our competencies with the data that we have, we can create tools that can really push the agenda forward in a quite dramatic way together with our clients. And we can also connect our data with AI to do future predictions about our cities, and which was mentioned here earlier as well, that this is really what we need to have now. We need to forecast the future so we can make better decisions in the future. Also in terms of how we budget and make investments. And of course, we also take a big responsibility as a company, and we have set our own targets for being climate neutral in 2040. And in Sweden, our goal is aligned with the Paris Agreement to be climate positive by 2030. And we just released our State of Sustainability report last week that also start reporting with data on our own sustainability goals. And we are on track with a lot of the things that we do as a company, as an operation, and the way that we advise our clients and partners on being more sustainable in the built environment. But we also need a lot of data to be able to track ourselves in our mission to become climate positive. But today I will talk a little bit about the tools that we as a company can design and produce and co-create together with our clients. And one of them is called the Carbon Cost Compass, or C3. And it is a innovative and easy to use calculation tool that uses construction and property data to calculate both carbon emissions and cost in money to reduce the footprint of buildings and in cities. because we started to see a need from our client to make investment decision very early on in projects, both from a cost perspective, but also from a climate perspective and climate impact perspective. And of course, one of the triggers here has been the new laws from the EU that requires a declaration of the carbon footprint in the whole life cycle of buildings, with everything from raw materials to products. And it means that it becomes very important for our clients to make decisions very early on in the project, in the building construction phase. So you could say that the C3 has become a calculator for a new currency for carbon. And the C3 tool is developed by Sweco, and it's both a service and a tool, and it calculates the footprint and the cost, both for carbon and in money for buildings in the early phases. And it's actually the only tool currently that handles both simultaneously. So it means that you can have one building that you or one model that you can import to the tool, and not having to have multiple models and multiple calculations. So you can simulate different scenarios with building materials. And you can make quite advanced calculations with simple modeling. And you can compare the results from different materials in the same model. And we have also integrated generative AI into the model, so the tool can be trained by AI to predict future scenarios and automate recipes for a certain type of building. And the first version was released in 2022, so it's a while back now. It was released at Autodesk University, and it's called New Build Base. And its primarily focus was on a new construction. And the database uses the carbon data and financial data that is aligned with the climate declaration. And this project here is a mixed-use development in Luleå, in the north of Sweden, where we calculated that the development would generate 180 kilograms of CO2 per built area, or per square meter, for all materials in the construction phase. And by the use of CLT and glulam, the development could also store 125 kilograms of CO2 per built area, which was equivalent then to save 70% of the total emission for the whole construction phase. So it also shows how we can use the different type of building materials. We've then developed a tool further also to retrofit, and I think retrofit has been mentioned here today. 90% of all buildings will be built by 2030, we think, and there's a huge potential also to capture the embedded value of carbon and cost in the existing building stock. And there we can see that we can really work with buildings or larger building stocks to calculate both the carbon and the cost for retrofit. Because, of course, we know that it's better to retrofit than to do a quick fix of a building. But we also need to show that it's both cost efficient and also make a climate impact in the long perspective. And of course, the initial phase will be higher, but in the long term, it will compete with the new built environment. This project is Blick Hotel in Stockholm by Sweco Architects. And here we retrofitted an old existing building into a hotel. And the volume of reused materials showed that our client could save €750 per square meter in value. So these values, and together with the carbon cost saving, becomes a new currency that will become very important for us, also as advisors and consultants, when we advise our clients to make the right decisions. And moving up, we have now also developed C3 into C3 City, because we can see that this will become a very important decision-making strategy also for our cities and mayors in cities in the future. And we already see it with the cities in Sweden and around Europe today that will become climate neutral by 2030, but they don't have the tools to measure yet. And this is the biggest challenge. So in Trelleborg, in the south of Sweden, we are creating the first climate neutral city by extending the use of C3 to C2 City. So we can now calculate the climate budget on a city scale. And this means that cities and local authorities can forecast their climate budget together with their development plans at scale. So it really allows us to kind of look at the whole scale of building and building materials through to buildings and neighborhoods, and also create climate scenarios and backcasting climate budgets for our clients, and also kind of improve the climate impact that they can then put into their investment plan on the city scale. So really trying to use this tool at all scales, which is possible. And of course, we can also look at other things in cities. This is a project called Näringen in Gävle in the north of Sweden, where we have looked at a city neighborhood with 6,000 flats, where we can look at other values. We can look at circular economy, where we can bring energy and transport in infrastructure, water and biodiversity into the mix. And this neighborhood, we have suggested a retrofit of an old industrial neighborhood, where we calculated that we could save as much as 75% of the total energy needs, and also by implementing sustainable mobility, which could be tracked by you guys at Telia, we could actually save and reduce carbon emission by 97% compared to current levels. And the interesting part here, because it is an old industrial area, we could reuse a lot of materials and save up to 1 million ton of carbon in this project. So lastly, a project that we're currently working on at scale is that we're also using the community in the European Green Deal and climate neutral cities to map out all circular economies across Europe. We're creating a database where you can tap into a system and map your circular economies across cities in Europe, so we can really gather data on a large scale and work together collaborative to find how to create circular economies in our European cities. Great, and there's a lot of insights, and we're really happy to share our insights with with everyone. So we release a lot of reports on a regular basis. So if you're interested in learning more about what we do and the data that we collect and how we use it, you're welcome to tap into our Urban Insight reports. Scan this code or visit our website.
Huge thank you
very
to
much.
you, Anna, and a round of applause for you. And I will see you back on stage in just a little bit. Now, finally, I would like to invite up our last speaker of the day, Sharika Vijapus, who is a computer vision and machine learning engineer at Universes. And we have a little change of computer going on here. Please, welcome up on stage. A huge round of applause for you as well. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone, my name is Harika and I'm a computer vision and machine learning engineer at Universes. Today I'm going to tell you all about computer vision and how we are applying computer vision, machine learning, deep learning and artificial intelligence to data to make cities more sustainable. Let's get started. A little bit about computer vision. So if you've observed that cars nowadays, they're not just a bunch of moving parts put together. They have a host of sensors, camera being one of them. Now, if we combine visual data from cameras with motion data, then it's possible to reconstruct the environment that the vehicle is driving in and map it as you do. Now, if you add the layer of semantics, wherein the vehicle can understand what the environment around it is made of, what sort of objects are present. Like here, you can see that other cars are being detected. We could detect pedestrians. Then this set of algorithms essentially is the recipe or the secret sauce for autonomous driving. Now, you must be wondering, who are we and why am I talking about autonomous driving in this summit? So we are Universes, founded in Stockholm. We started in 2015 as a startup, a very small company. Now we're close to 45 or more employees. And like I said, we're all tech nerds, experts in computer vision, machine learning, and AI. So together with Zensact, the first logo that you see on the screen, we embarked on a journey to realize the dream of autonomous vehicles out there on the streets. And the software that we're writing along with them, it's meant to come out in the Volvo and the Polestar cars later this year. So if you happen to be in one of those vehicles, then remember us. But somewhere down the line, when we realized that all of these vehicles that are going to be out there driving on the streets, they will be going to every nook and corner of the city and be able to collect millions of data points that will completely revolutionize how we understand the health of our urban infrastructure. And today we've had a lot of discussions about the need for data, and we are finding new avenues to capture this data and how we can be smart about it. In this regard, we've also worked with several municipalities and road maintenance organizations, Trafikverket in Sweden, Stadens Vägväsen in Norway, just to mention a few, and Helsingborg, of course. So I've told you the how. And the output of that, like when you transform the data from these vehicles, from these fleets of vehicles, then you can basically produce AI-generated maps that are updated real time. So we spoke about some challenges about having very outdated data. But here, as the vehicles are driving around, you keep getting new data. And this can be used for changing the way you do urban and road maintenance. Having said the how, I'll motivate the why. I believe in today's summit, we got plenty of motivation and understood the effect of urbanization. But what I want to stress is that in the era of urbanization, it has become more important now for cities to ensure smooth and flow and connectivity than before. With so many people living in the cities, the cities are basically the lifeline, and you have to keep them running. But the operation cost of keeping these cities functional is tremendously high. Like, consider the case of potholes. Just in the US, to fix the potholes, the cost is almost $3 billion. And here we could not just save money, but improve the standard of living for the citizens and also reduce emissions. But how do we do this? It's pretty simple. Although autonomous vehicles are not currently ubiquitous and present in the streets as we would like them to, we figured we could retrofit a smartphone with our proprietary Android application that's mounted on a vehicle. And as it drives around, it's collecting images and and extracting useful information from it. So here you can see that I was identifying roadworks. I mean, speaking of roadworks, we are surrounded by roadworks right behind me. And this information is then available on a dashboard for easy access. So as it drives around, the data gets updated, and we also collect information about the quality of the roads. This is something that's not easily understood by the human eye, and this is where we use AI, we use the power of AI to make a difference. To summarize, install the app on a smartphone, and here what's important is the scalability of the solution. It's just a smartphone. All of us have one right now. And it can be on any vehicle. need not be a car. Although the video showed you a car, it could be a bus, it could be a truck, it could be a scooter, it could be a bike. And most of the processing is done on the edge, which means it's done on the phone, and only a select or important or interesting part of the information is sent to the cloud for further processing. Then this information is available to be accessed by all the road maintenance authorities or the urban maintenance authorities, the administration, for easy traceability and just understanding the status and the health of the city. While these vehicles are driving through crowds, we ensure complete privacy by anonymizing the images. So we blur out the license plates and faces, for example. And this is done at the very first stage of the pipeline. So as soon as the image is captured, it's anonymized, so it cannot be traced back to where it came from or who is in the picture. And this is very important if you're functioning in a very public space. You want to respect everyone's privacy. So this ensures that we are GDPR compliant. Now, can AI see everything that a human eye can see? Maybe it's not there yet. But there are a lot of possibilities of what we can get from this data. And through our association with municipalities and organizations, and by having a lot of conversations with them and trying to understand where the need is or what could we do to make the biggest difference, we decided to work on traffic signs, road damage, and roadworks as the first set of classes that we want to excel in, champion in. And we've also done studies on analyzing parking. So we can all relate that finding parking in Stockholm, it's not easy. So we try to understand the supply and demand. And with street lights, LED lights are more energy efficient than non-LED lights. So we want to replace them as much as possible and ensure that the coverage is optimal. So we've had the chance to work with various municipalities and implement this in action. Why traffic signs? Amongst the list that I showed you, why traffic signs? Now, just take the city of Stockholm. There's almost 5 million traffic signs. And it's important to maintain them correctly so that they're functioning well. Now, when I say that they need to function well, you may be wondering, how could they malfunction, right? They're just a traffic sign. But if you see in the pictures, they can get worn out over time. They can just fade. It can be because of rainfall, weather, or they can just be obstructed or faded and then not visible to the driver. And when the cities are not displaying the correct, or when the administration is not displaying the correct traffic sign, then you cannot expect good driver behavior from the public, right? And the administration has a responsibility to ensure that the correct speed limit is displayed to the drivers at all times. This is as per the EU regulation. And how does Universes help? So the video was about how we drive around and collect traffic sign information. So we can detect, classify, and position traffic signs. So with the computer vision algorithms that I earlier introduced my talk with, we can do all of that. And then you basically have a map of where your traffic signs are present, what sort of traffic signs are they. But not just this. With our advanced algorithms, we can also identify which signs need to be fixed. Maybe they're covered by snow, graffiti, foliage, or they're just slanted or obstructed by something else. You can easily identify that on the dashboard. And instead of having to go around, manually inspect all the signs and do this, you can just do this from the dashboard and also follow up on the progress. Because as the vehicles drive around collecting new data, you can see if this particular traffic sign now looks better now. So this is sort of like the power of data, power of real-time data that we are trying to harness at Universes and help the roads become safer and make the cities a nicer place to live in. Now, whether you're dropping your kids off to school or hitting the speed limit on the freeway, we all want safe and smooth roads, right? And they should be free of potholes and bumps. So for the municipality to ensure this, it's quite a challenge. And currently, there's a lot of manual inspection. Technicians drive around, taking notes of where the potholes are present. This is expensive, time-consuming, and for the technicians, it's just dull and boring. So 3D ICT wants to be a game changer here. And we've spoken about CO2 emissions and trying to make buildings more efficient just now. And another source of pollution or CO2 emissions is laying roads and fixing the road damages. The raw materials used, like tar, bitumen, coal, asphalt, they're pretty damaging for the environment. So you want to be judicious in their use. And when it comes to the contractors who are laying the roads, it's probably not incentivizing for them to fix it early, because that means they get lesser money to themselves. Now, Universes tries to do something called as preventative maintenance, where if you follow the red curve, I hope it's visible to everybody, and after the road is laid, you don't maintain it, you don't do anything, and you just let it deteriorate over time. Then to fix it or make it back alive, then you need a lot of money, almost 250 euros per meter square. But if you're following the black curve, where you detect damage early, and here in this video, you can see how, as we are driving, we can detect damage and we classify them into different colors based on what type of damages they are. Then if you detect this damage early, the cost of fixing it is just 1/8 of that. And you can do that over time. And you don't just save money, but you've extended the lifetime of the road by 12 whole years. That's a lot of benefits, and that's something that we just can't ignore. So here, as you can see, you can see patches of purple. So that's just detection of the road damage. And when it comes to road damage, it's interesting because something that looks terrible to the eye may not be as bad. So you need experts to understand if this damage is actually that bad. And we have in-house road engineer experts to help us make this decision and help the AI be correct all the time. So we calculate something called as pavement condition index. It's just a reflection of how good or bad the score is. And we can lay it over the map and tell exactly where the roads are good, where the roads are bad. If it's green, it's good. If it's red, it needs fixing. Then the road maintenance engineers, basically they can sit back, access this data, and instead of driving around for 2.5 days to go fix them, they can just plan out their operations, sitting at their laptop, and make use of their knowledge in a better way. And this reduces the amount of labor that's needed, the amount of time that's taken, and just brings down the cost of the operations and makes the whole thing much more efficient. So along with just displaying what's present, we also go through the data to find interesting analytics, something. And this really is like one of the things that is possible only with data, that you need evidence, you need statistics. And you can then uncover new facts about the city that you probably didn't know before. So if you see this graph down here, this table down here, it's a list of roads that are ranked by the worst level of damages. Now, if I ask you to give me the list of the worst roads in Stockholm, I don't know if you would have one ready. But then with the level of data that we have, we can calculate this very quickly, and this would really help the organizations, administrations, really understand where their resources need to go. Now, we've spoken about the conventional roads where the vehicles are moving around, but one part of the road that's ignored by, not ignored, but sort of doesn't get as much attention as the places where the cars are going is the bike lanes. And mounting a phone on a bike, you can get information about how the bike lanes are. And with bike lanes, it's even more important to maintain them in a good state, because the chances of collisions or accidents coming from a bad bike lane is much higher than on the regular road where a car is driving. So with the help of Universes technology, we are trying to increase the number of modalities, get data channels, and get more data channels, and we're trying to reach all sections of the society and trying to make the maximum difference with the data that we have. Now, I just want to, so I've told about the class of data that we have mostly worked with, I just want to take some time to highlight our collaborations with municipalities where we had the opportunity to make a difference, that we got a chance to work with them. First, starting with our home, Stockholm, which houses 1 million people and has a complex, wide road network, like 1,500 kilometers. With Universe's 3DI City, we used 22 vehicles, 20 of them being taxis that you see outside. And these taxis are just doing their thing, dropping off customers to places. But as they're driving, the only difference is they have an additional phone with our app running on it that's collecting data, and that's proving to be so useful to the city of Stockholm to understand where the road damages are existing. And with the help of our road maintenance experts, we could give insights as to where the damages are and how to make the best use of their budget. So it turns out there was a deficit of budget, like the actual budget available versus what was needed, there was a deficit, causing a road maintenance debt. Now, this is where 3DI City can make a real difference, and you can put your resources, allocate your budget exactly where it needs to go, ensure that your roads are always in a good condition while not accumulating debt in maintenance. Another city further south of Sweden that we had the honor to work with is Helsingborg. And here, the work was recognized with the prestigious Jota Priset. I believe that's a huge award in the public sector field of public projects. And if you see this garbage truck here, it's a garbage truck going around the city, collecting garbage and keeping the cities clean. But it also had the camera, it also had the phone with our app running on it, and basically gave us a complete coverage of Helsingborg city. And here, by deploying 3DI City, the difference was so visible that the number of potholes went down from 3,000 to 900. Making it a significant improvement of quality of living for the citizens. I think this is a huge takeaway. And not just this, by efficient allocation of resources and cutting costs and saving on labor, then the city was able to save almost 80,000 euros per year. Now, this is precious taxpayers' money, right? Hard-earned taxpayers' money that could be put to better use with our technology. Thank you for me.
With that, I would like to invite our speakers up on stage. Anna and Christopher, please join Shiorika. So my first question to you is, thank you for your presentation, very interesting, but I can imagine that not everything has been like a smooth ride when developing your products and your services. Are there any obstacles or hurdles or challenges that you could share that were in the way of reaching the goals that you've been presenting here today, Christopher?
Well, I don't think it has so much to do perhaps with the data in the product itself or just that unique product, but the product we've built has never existed anything like it before. So that means our customers who ultimately have to want to buy our product has never used anything like that before. And they're not used to working in a data-driven manner. Like the surveys, I mean, you get data, very limited data every 5 years. And then you have a product here that shows you data every day. So our biggest challenge have been and is to really work very closely with the customers so that our products really fit their needs and so that they can change their processes to really make use of it, to get to the outcome.
Anna?
Well, I guess I represent quite a conservative industry, the construction industry that moves quite slowly when it comes to innovation in general, if I can say so. I guess that's an obstacle as kind of like a collective industry. But I think that the biggest hurdle is, of course, to find collaboration partners, because we can always develop tools. That's our strength, that we have the ability to do that, but find the right collaboration partners to test it. And I think also as consultants, I think the whole industry for consultants in architecture and engineering is changing a lot with AI. So we are also forced into finding new business models. And I think a general challenge is, of course, to move from time and material to products in the consultancy business. Yeah.
Sharika, what do you say? Any obstacles in the way, and is there anything standing in the way of you scaling up further?
So, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, like we envision autonomous vehicles to be out there soon on the streets. So that's a strategy to scale up.
What is soon? How soon?
Soon is hopefully this year. Okay. Or at least part of driver assistance technology that will soon develop to be completely autonomous.
But any challenges that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, so our keynote speaker, he said that technology is always 10 years ahead of how people are ready to adapt it. And we find similar reluctance that, you know, you don't want to break or change how you've been doing things. Maybe they worked for you in a way, but then when we say that it can be done better, there's definitely a bit of reluctance in adopting or moving forward with it, you know.
Of course, the business community has a very important role to play, as we have been discussing here today. But you often need to work in partnerships that many of you mentioned with the public sector, cities, municipalities, right? How do you think, how is that collaboration going? Is it smooth? Are there any problems?
Can I? Yeah. So, I mean, like you saw our product, that it's meant for cities, it's meant for municipalities, and it's meant for transport organizations. And it's little challenging to find the right person to talk to, or the right person who can actually make this real, or, you know, make this happen. So that is definitely something that we've been learning over the years, or definitely trying to see how, you know, we can close the loop and make this network shorter.
Any perspectives on that?
Yeah, so for us, collaboration is really crucial. It's a key part of our go-to-market strategies. So let's take our data. We talked about, we mentioned Tyrens as a partner. It's really useful, our data, for example, when you want to evaluate if you want to build a new bridge, hugely expensive project. But no one really calls Telia when they're building a bridge. So then you work with Sweco, you work with Tyrens, VSP, Ramboll, those type of players who work with, of course, many different types of data. So then we need to work with them, and then we need to have a business model fit as well, so that they get, you know, they see the value and customer sees the value, and our data gets used where it matters.
And any perspectives on collaboration with others?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we're a traditional industry to begin with, but we are also seeing that the type of collaboration partners that we have are changing. It's new actors that are joining the club to make this happen, and that's really exciting, I think. And if you look at the bigger picture, I think Sweden is a very easy kind of environment to collaborate with. We have a very kind of evolved model for collaboration. If you go outside of that, of the Nordics or Europe, I think the public-private partnerships are more tricky, and you have to find other models. But in general, I think it's pretty easy, and it's really exciting to see that we are finding new collaboration partners. Yeah.
Exciting.
Like Telia.
But in companies, things actually usually move faster than they do in perhaps city government, for instance. Is that a problem?
I mean, technology definitely goes fast, but yes, like we need feedback, and then we need people to use it to sort of progress. So yes, I mean, the difference in the rates of development could be hindering, but then they do align at some point. So, and when that alignment happens, then the change is definitely visible.
If you get the same question that Paul got from me, when you look out there and you look at cities, would you say that cities are smart or still quite stupid? What would you say?
I would say they're becoming smarter with time. Maybe they started with not having any smart features, and now they're becoming much smarter, and there's so much technology. I mean, we use our phones for Google and everything. And the cities, there's increased connectivity, increased accessibility, increased safety. So, and when something happens, and then there are ways to retrieve the correct data channels and understand why it happened. So we're definitely doing pretty good in terms of understanding why what's happening around us, but we can definitely improve a long way from here.
Christopher?
Well, I think we work with a lot of cities and regions, and I think they all aspire to be smarter. So I wouldn't make that sort of binary classification. What I see more of a hurdle is that it's very fragmented. So we see, I mean, in Sweden, we have 290 municipalities or cities. I mean, they procure IoT platforms in different ways. Some want feature A, some want B, some wants to build their own mobile network. We even have cities in Sweden actually trying to build their own mobile networks. And like with our Crowd Insights product, for example, where you can use that to measure carbon emissions. Well, if you had 290 cities actually using that, imagine the impact that they could have by collaborating and really using the same type of data source or some other product that provides something similar. So I think that's the main challenge, is that they all aspire to be smarter, but they do it by themselves, not together.
But is there anything happening out there right now, any city that you think is especially inspiring when it comes to using data to becoming more sustainable?
Well, I'm quite biased in this. I mean, I mentioned Botkyrka, for example, who is using, from a sustainability perspective, using our product to actually be evidence-based in how they work with sustainability actions. So I think that's very forward-leaning. We have other customers using it also, and it's very much driven from the sustainability angle. It's not like we need tech, we need a platform, we need to connect things. It's coming from, we need to lower emissions, and we need to figure out of the 1,000 things we can do, what should we do?
That's the purpose, lower emissions. Yeah. Anna, your perspective?
I think Andreas said it very well last night at the sustainability dinner, that, what was it, 5 days it took? Was it you that guessed it right, Anna? 5 days for ChatGPT to reach 1 million users, and it's taken Stockholm a few hundred years to reach 1 million inhabitants. So cities are slow. I think that gives us a perspective of the kind of how we also need to work with people and create livable, inclusive and diverse cities, and that takes time. But I think we can use, and there's definitely examples of cities that are on the forefront, and we can learn from them, I think. And of course, Stockholm and Sweden and the cities in Europe has to be driven by data now, and to be competitive as cities and competitive as knowledge hubs where people want to come and live.
And my last question for you then, what excites you about the future, the next coming years, when it comes to the issues that we have discussed here today? Would you like to start?
Maybe this is biased, but I think the perspectives of having fully autonomous vehicles out there on the roads are completely game-changing, and they will change the way how we live and move around. So I'm really excited for that. And also generative AI. I think there's a lot of scope for how we can use it. Maybe we haven't even fully understood what it can do or what are the capabilities. So I'm really looking forward to how that space evolves.
Interesting. Anna?
Ooh, it's a big question, but I mean, I'm very optimistic in general, and I see it always as an opportunity to develop and become smarter, and I think it's necessary. So, Christopher?
Quite similar. I mean, in the context of cities, I'm really optimistic. I think really I'm excited about seeing cities really using the tech, but with a problem in mind that you're trying to solve. And I mean, Anna mentioned that she wants to see more predictive, what-if kind of analysis. There's so much more we can do with the data first, instead of putting people in jeopardy, fixing potholes or other things that consume resources and may be bad for people or the environment. You could simulate much more. So I think as we become more mature in using data, we will get to what Anna was talking about, more the simulation, what-if scenarios. More is done before the actual, committing people, or committing resources.
Thank you so much for your insightful perspectives. We are also optimistic at the Chamber about the future of our cities, and we are very happy that we have hosted this Sustainability Summit here today. A big round of applause for this panel. Just a short roundup. Today's summit is part of a new initiative here at the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce that is called Sustainable City, where we aim to focus on the role and power of cities in the transition towards a more sustainable future. And there are still some events before the summer that you can tune into, so please log on to our website and see what is happening on the Chamber stage this spring. However, the summit is not yet over, as I mentioned when I had my introduction. We now want to welcome you to join us for our after work and mingle together with London and partners to meet some PropTech, cleantech and circular startup companies in just a few minutes. So please stay, mingle and enjoy. Thank you from the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce.